Hello and welcome everyone to this session, Bottlenecks in Your Brain. We've got three guest speakers lined up for you. Last of all will be Karl Perry. Karl's a psychologist. He'll be talking about how he uses the thinking tools in his job. We've got Peter Thorby, who's been using the thinking tools to help crack some pretty interesting cases on succession planning, especially for farmers. But right now we've got Jussi. Jussi is based in Wellington in New Zealand now, which is why we've let him in today. Originally from Finland, where he has a background as a professional theatre director. Sorry, Jussi, I knew it was there somewhere. What he does now is he uses the ToC thinking tools to improve leadership, and by that it's business and personal growth for people. As he said to me yesterday, you can't improve companies, only people. That's his area of specialty, and he's going to talk to us today about how he uses clouds to do that. So over to you, Jussi.
Thank you very much, Graham. So it's nice to be here. I dearly love ToC, and especially I love evaporating cloud because it's so practical and simple and plain, and my old brain can't take much more complex things than the diagram that has just 5 different rectangles. So that's my favorite tool. And today, what I'm gonna do, I just run you through the basic flow of evaporating cloud. I don't know how many of you in the audience already know the evaporating cloud, so this is kind of 101. So you can go and have a cup of coffee if you already know evaporating cloud and if you use it. Vicky Mabin, you can have some Pinot Noir and relax, and you can chuckle when I'm trying to make some sense out of this. So without further ado, you should see my screen now. I guess you will see it. And there is Eliyahu M. Goldratt in the cloud. And my history with Goldratt dates back to 10 years or so when I did my MBA. And I was just about to go to Israel to meet Mr. Goldratt, and unfortunately he passed away. So I have never met Mr. Goldratt, but I really love the work he has done and the legacy. So he is there in the cloud, hopefully watching us. So what is evaporating cloud then? So if we go deeper into this thing, we have these thinking processes, which are part of the tool set, if you like, that has been formulated or created based on Eliyahu M. Goldratt's work. And these thinking processes gave me personally a way to kind of start to understand how systems could be understood and how systems could be easily communicated between different people in the organizations. And like tomorrow I'm running a workshop with 11 admin people, and we are using these thinking processes to make some sense out of their reality and what would they like to see in the future. So as you can see, there are many diagrams in play here. This is taking, I just took a screenshot from one site where this traditional flow of thinking processes has been described, and it starts from the current reality tree. What is the state of the system? Where is the pain? Then evaporating cloud as a tool to kind of try to solve the problem or conflict and find a new way of creating win-win situation. And then we have future reality tree, what kind of future we would like to see based on the injections and thinking during the process. and what does it mean in practice. So what are the prerequisites to build, to implement those solutions, and finally how to implement the whole new reality there, taking into considerations all those aspects of reality. So this is in one slide the thinking process diagram family, but today we are going deeper into the evaporating cloud. So what is the anatomy of the evaporating cloud? And I'm so sorry if my accent is off the charts, because it is from Finland, and sometimes, you know, my metaphors don't fly in English very well. They are low-flying Finnish metaphors. So my apologies if something that I say is not good for your ears. So that's your constraint, not mine. So evaporating cloud. It's a simple diagram, and I love it because it is so simple. It starts from A and goes to B and C and D prime. And for me, the most difficult thing in evaporating cloud was to remember what was the thing with D and this comma up there. And I almost failed my exam at Massey University because I didn't remember during the exam that it's D prime. So now I tattooed it on my bum, so it's always there. So this is now the diagram. A, B, C, D, D prime. In order to have A, I must have B. In order to have B, I must have D. So this is the flow of things, and how it then works. We have the common goal, objective, in the A. On the left-hand side, there is something that we really want to see happening, or our goal as an objective, like making more money, or have a better relationship, or whatever is the common goal. Usually then B is the need that is satisfied by the actions in the D. So we all have needs. Later today we will hear more about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and all that jazz. Now we need to just know that, okay, we all have needs, and it can be described in this box, which then leads to the want. What do we want to do? And for me, the big eureka moment was when I realized that actually, as human beings, the needs and wants are different. We want all kinds of things, but do those wants really support the real needs? And then we have here, down here, the C is another need. So quite often we have not one but two needs. Some of us even have three needs, but I come that to later. And there is a want to support that need. So if we read it now, in order to have the common goal fulfilled, I need to have B, and in order to have B, I must have want. So these are kind of rules that we read this diagram to understand it better. And here is an example, or actually I forgot that there is a conflict between those two. So wants usually are those things that, you know, I want to go to the restaurant and my wife would like to go to movies. So there is a conflict, restaurants or the movies. These are in conflict. But we need to understand, okay, if my wife wants to go to the movies, what is the need that the movie will fulfill? And I want to go to the restaurant. What is my need? So I'm hungry, my wife needs entertainment. Can we have a win-win solution? And actually we can, because using this diagram we can start to build the solution even for these mundane stupid problems, whether we go to the movies or whether we we go to the restaurant. And then if we are very, very dogmatic about the diagram, we need to make sure that D will jeopardize this need. So this want, what we want to do, for example, I want to go to the restaurant, it's not possible, you know, if my wife would like to go to the movies, the need doesn't allow that. And same this crisscross. So this is kind of the alchemy of the evaporating cloud. And here is one example. Manage production well. In order to manage production well, we need to fulfill production orders on time. And in order to fulfill production orders on time, we must use overtime and subcontractors. That's one side of the problem. And then below there is manage production well. In order to manage production well, we need to control costs. And in order to control cost, we don't use overtime and subcontractors. This is a real-time example from one company. So there was this conflict. Can we use overtime people and subcontractors, or are we able just shall we just forget the whole thing? It was a conflict, and the company was struggling how to really make this work. And we make it work because we need to identify the culprits. And the culprits have fingerprints, and those fingerprints are our assumptions. Every arrow here has a because. So if we manage production well and fulfill production orders on time, the because sentence there below is an assumption why this holds water. And when we surface those assumptions, then we are starting to go deeper into the potential solution. So assumptions are the culprits, and really the biggest ones are those false assumptions. But without listing those assumptions, we can't really start to challenge them and find those assumptions that are false and will help the conflict together. So what do? We inject something in the reality, something new that creates win-win situation without causing any new harmful effects. So injections at the point of this time is very topical, because we all hopefully have had our 2 doses of vaccination and one constraint less. So we surface assumptions, then we inject a new way of doing something, and win-win solution comes as part of the reality. The conflict evaporates. We will fulfill both needs because one or both of those wants are replaced by the new entity or new aspect of the reality. So this is in nutshell the evaporating cloud as a tool. It starts from defining what is our common goal. We need to understand what are the needs we need to fulfill in order to make that goal to become true, and what are the wants and what is the conflict that holds them together. And when we remove those false assumptions, when we remove the conflict, we remove one or both of those wants, but those needs will be still fulfilled, and we are happy chaps. So, and here we go. I use a lot in my coaching sessions this tool, https://evaporatingclouds.com. Swedish very clever blokes have created this little tool, and it gives us a way to quickly build evaporating clouds without having to read all the Coldrat's literature and academic literature that has been written ever since. If we just want to have a quick way of looking how does it work, we can use this tool, and Wiki confirms. The website is great, walks you through the process. Hallelujah. Thank you, Wiki. This came from academic, so I'm not bullshitting you. So, what a relief. because these tools can be very complex and complicated, and we can make ourselves, sweat with these tools. But if we want to really have a quick taste how it works, this tool will do the trick. And now I show you the tool. And you most probably see now my Safari, which is nicer than Chrome in my thinking, but that's my personal view. So it is very simple website. You just read a little bit of a introduction, and then you have your goals, clouds, and you can create a cloud or edit your clouds and show your clouds. I put there yesterday one cloud I created with one freelance designer who she had a problem a couple of months ago actually. She came to me and said that, Jussi, could you coach me a little, because I have just started my freelance practice and it's not going so well as I would have liked. So could we find a way around what should we do? And the biggest problem she had, she didn't sell. So she was really hating the whole idea of selling things. And now I go and refresh this, because obviously it has been, come on, increase sales. Okay, here is the cloud we built together. So the entities are these boxes. So I asked her to describe what is her conflict. So she said that I am running out of cash and the revenue stream is not great. I want to be free to work with great people, but also want to charge for my services. So then we went on, and what action are you feeling pressure to take to deal with the problem? So we go deeper. So do cold calls and approach as many people as I can. So she has this pressure to just do cold calls, and everybody who is working with business hates cold calling and just going through the customer list that, hey, this is this and that, would you like to buy from me this and that? So she described that one. And on the other hand, I feel pressure to do cold calls and approach as many people as I can. On the other hand, I also feel pressure not to sell. So they said, I don't want to sell. And suddenly we have here now the system creates this D and D prime. Do cold calls and approach as many people as I can, and then D prime. This is where not to sell comes. And in that way we just fill the whole evaporating cloud. So then we come to the needs. Do cold calls and approach as many people as I can. So the need there is earn enough money sustainably. So she wanted to create sustainable income stream. So she wrote it there. And off we go to the next one, and then if I decide to do cold calls and approach as many people as I can, I will endanger my need to be free to do my own stuff. So there's a need to do her own stuff. So the system will then put all those entities in right order. Earn enough money to sustainably. In order to earn enough money sustainably, she must do cold calls and approach as many people as she can. And then, on the other hand, the conflict inside is that to be free to do her own stuff, she must not sell. So have time to do her own stuff. And then we go further, And the objective is have enough money to be financially free to pursue her own creative project. So this comes then the A statement there. And that's how we created the cloud. The goal is have enough money to be financially free to pursue her own creative project. In order to do that, she needs to earn money sustainably. In order to do that, she needs to do cold calls. And in the other hand, be free to do her own stuff. And in order to do that, she should not sell but focus on working. So now we have this cloud defined, and the next phase is then to surface these assumptions, and they are these arrows, or behind these arrows are the culprits, the fingerprints of assumptions. And for example, from A to B, we filled with her assumption is without money I cannot pay the bills and sustain my living and plan my life. So obviously that holds forth water. So she needs to have this valid assumption. Also here below this little arrow is I don't have enough existing contacts and customers. And then came the final phase. We started to put injections. And injections, she suggested, I need to find people who can refer me to potential buyers. Actually, she realized that she doesn't need to sell. She needs to find people who can sell her. And then under this arrow here, I hate selling. Then she realized that if she makes selling a game and starts to look it more lightly, she might like to do selling if she's selling through, those people who understand her creativity. And the conflict here, assumptions behind that, the real big conflict there was that I don't believe that my own stuff is commercial enough. So there was this, when we were talking about these assumptions, she came to conclusion that actually I have this inferiority complex. I don't believe that my stuff is good enough, and then on top of that I don't like routines. So we then created injections so that she could start to Google the pain points the customers might have, reach companies and ask people what they think are good services to sell, and then work harder on her materials consistently so that she can build portfolios, and then create free flow structure so that she's not prison of routines but have a free flow structure. So this was a couple of coaching sessions we had, but this cloud actually helped her to solve the problem and inject couple of new ways of working and come out of the situation as a quite successful designer. And last time when I heard from her, she told me that her business is now better and she has more freedom now to work on her own stuff instead of trying to live from tuna fish and rice. So that was in a nutshell, in 24 minutes, what evaporating cloud is and what it can do for you. So I'm sorry if I was waffling around and all over the place, but the good news with evaporating cloud and this evaporatingclouds.com is that if you use them, and if you are a person like me who goes all over the place, this gives you a structure to think organically but in structured way the process, so that you are almost bound to get a solution that fulfills your needs and you can get rid of those conflicts. So that's now my little thing here, and I think I need to just evaporate these clouds of doubts, and thank you for your time. It's 25 past noon Over to you, Graham.
Right, thank you very much, Jussi. So just to recap on what you were saying, and some of my own experiences, the more research I've done into things like creativity always sounds like some woo-woo sort of thing, but in actual fact, the more structure you have around it, the more creative you're able to be. Is that your experience as well?
Yep. If I had been expert in ToC when I was theater director, I would have improved my creativity a lot. And if you have ever been writing books, it's not the writing itself that is difficult. The structure and the creativity comes if you have a structure. And I don't believe creativity that happens in vacuum. It's always interaction. It's always, battlefield of conflicting ideas, and then you need to navigate through those.
Okay. And so this evaporating cloud is obviously a great tool for getting some of the stuff from your head down onto paper. And this person you were talking about, this graphics person, she was stuck on the fact that she didn't want a cold call.
Yeah.
And by unpacking that, putting into this cloud form, she found a couple of other viable options that meant she didn't need to do that.
Yeah. And she also was able to go deeper, because her deeper fear was this inferiority complex, and she thought that her stuff is not good enough to warrant sales. And that was hard for her, because she, when she started, Peter Cook always says that the first sell you do is you sell yourself. So when you are ready to buy your own stuff, then the sales happen. And it means that you need to have conviction. And evaporating cloud can give you conviction, because you can surface those false assumptions that held you back.
Okay. And that's certainly something that Karl Perry will be digging into in about another half hour's time. So you see, we've seen an example of you using these clouds, and I understand that you run training sessions for these with groups of people and also individual coaching.
Yeah, I have run workshops, and I have both online and face-to-face workshops, training workshops and coaching for this, because I love the tool.
Yeah. And you were telling me yesterday that Finnish people tend to be very blunt. So if I came to you for coaching, you wouldn't let me get away with anything.
Mm-hmm. I'm bloody good at surfacing your assumptions, bro.
Okay. So what's the best way for someone to get hold of you if they wanted to do some coaching or have you run workshops for them?
Just book time with me. I have website jussiluukkonen.com, and it's easy, because my first name, last name, and .com, and my number is also there. Are actually everyone 021-99652. Oh. I'm open to all.
Well, now that's Is that the right spelling that Clark's put in the chat?
That's the right spelling.
All right. Thank you very much, Jussi. And
you're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Great. And you'll be around in an hour's time for our question and answer session.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
We'll look forward to hearing a bit more from you then.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Thank you. Right. It's my pleasure now to introduce Peter Thorby to you. Peter has been using ToC thinking tools ever since you installed it in your father's furniture factory. When was that, Peter?
That was way back in 1997, Graham.
Right, so very last century. And what Peter is going to talk to us today, originally a lot of these tools were developed for business, and what Peter's going to talk us through is how he's now using some of these tools in family succession situations, which, yes, it's based around business, but it's way more about emotions and people, isn't it, Peter?
Well, I found that out, Graham.
Yeah. But the tools were robust enough that you survived.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I'll share screens now.
Okay.
Not sure if...
Yep, that's coming through loud and clear.
Okay. And
Now,
okay.
for those of you who aren't New Zealanders or Australians, we refer to our farmers here as cowcockies. Cowcockies or sheepcockies. It's just a nickname, hence why that appeared on the first screen.
Yeah. So I had a guy ring me and say, "Oh, Peter, I've heard you can help people through with thinking issues." And he said, "I've got a farm succession problem that I need to talk about." And I said, "Well, look, I know nothing about farming. I was brought up in a small country town and went to school with a whole lot of farmers' sons. And one day somebody said, do you know what a wether is, Peter?" And I said, "Well, no, I don't actually." They said, "Well, it's a ram without any back wheels." So that was about as close I came to understanding about what farming's all about. So anyway, so I went to see this guy and met him on his farm, and he started to show me around his farm and his truck, and it was very fascinating. And he was really proud to show me all his toys, and by toys what I mean is the headers and the tractors, and it was quite a big farm. It was about 600 hectares, I think, which in English language is about 1,000 acres, something like that.
1,500, but yeah.
Oh, 1,500, okay, so that's how much of a farmer I am. And he started to tell me the story. And I started to realise that this is one farmer. And it wouldn't surprise me if many farmers had the same story. And then you throw into that the businessmen who have got like manufacturers as their business, or distribution, or whatever the business is, and it's owned by a company, and there's shares in the company, and there's mum and dad are getting older and they're wondering what they're going to do. And then you open up the newspaper and you find that there's stories in the newspaper about all these succession scraps that have gone to the courts. And these are multi-million-dollar arguments in the courts. Field day for the lawyers and the accountants to earn money off. And you actually realise that it's a pretty big arena, this succession planning. And a farm consultant was telling me one day, he said, "Oh, Peter," he said, "I had this bloke come to me, and he was aged, I think he said like 47 or something. And he said, "Oh, I think I'm a bit early coming to you. I want to talk about succession planning." And the bloke said, "Mate, you're about 15 years too late." And you can imagine that as time moves on with these families, you have mum and dad, and you've got the children, and the children get married and they have spouses. Some of them have spouses, some of them don't have spouses, and then some of them split up and have second spouses. And then you've got the stepchildren and the grandchildren. Like, these things just take on a life of their own. And somehow out of all of this, you've got to try and construct a way through it that people are comfortable with the outcome. And a mate of mine who is a farm accountant, he said he's been into meetings where he's had to sit there and thump the table and say, "Mate, if we don't get this sorted soon, it'll be sorted by death." And that's probably an uglier outcome than what it will be by sorting it while we're all still alive. So it's turning out to be a massively big thing. Anyway, moving on. And then what I started to find when I was talking to this farmer, like underneath the hood, you've got all this activity happening that I would call unequalness. And so just to use an example, you've got mum and dad who own the farm, and you've got this You've got 3 children, one son's working on the farm, one son's gone off to do something else. And then 17 years later, he comes back to the farm, and you've got a daughter involved in there as well. And somehow you're trying to operate where you're being fair to everybody. And then you realise that the people on the farm, they're buying stuff on the farm account for personal use, and one's got a diesel car and one's got a petrol car, and that never gets equated out. And all these things go on and on until it hits D-Day. There becomes a crunch point. And when I went to see this farmer, basically this was crunch point. And all this stuff was coming out of the woodwork, all this unfairness, and somehow we've got to get it all square.
Mm.
Often land is owned by a trust. The farming operation, like the tractors and the headers and the harvesters and the actual thing of farming the land, is owned by a company with the family as shareholders. Typically debt is secured over the land and the equipment. And now mum and dad have got to the point where they wish to divest. But each family has now gathered up their issues of entitlement along the way. And I use that, I say entitlement because that's my words. And the moment you mention the word entitlement in a conversation, man, it's confronting. Oh, yeah, exactly. Oh, what do you mean entitled? I'm not entitled at all. I just think I should have.
I deserve.
Yeah, I've been here longer than you have. And you get this whole rolling ball of, the rolling ball, what is it? The rolling ball gathers no moss or something. And it just becomes a big emotive story. But I was uncovering this as I went, because I sort of went there, I'll front up, just use the tools. And I actually want to ask, of our audience here, how many can put their hand up and say they can write 70 clouds in a day? Go on, stick your hands up. Who can write 70 clouds a day? Graham? I can't see everybody. Put a thumbs up in the chat if you think you can do 70 clouds a day. I'll give you
102
20
days
seconds to get on with it. If you can't, I strongly suggest you figure out how you can write 70 clouds in a day. And that's called fluency. And when you've got some fluency, this cloud tool can be used extensively into areas you know nothing about. It's a fantastic tool. And Jussi's given a bit of a rundown on what the cloud's all about. So now your mission is to get fluent on it and get to the point where you can write up 70 clouds a day. And it doesn't matter if they're stupid clouds, little clouds, big clouds. I suggest they're all relatively insignificant clouds. But that will gather your fluency to be able to go and do what I did with these farmers. So mum and dad's wishes, they wanted to treat each family fairly. They want to leave the farm as a family unit. And that's actually a massive assumption that they need to really check out. To have the children farm together, hand over the farm in great health, live a purposeful life, have Christmas together in 5 to 10 years. And we sort of think of that, oh yeah, what's all that about? Well, when you get into these farmers, many of them can't actually have Christmas together in 5 to 10 years' time. It's too much arguing, too much bickering, too much drama. So we're going to just have a look at a bit of a case study on farming. So I went to see this family, mum, dad, there was a son and a wife, a second son and a wife, and I saw them as individual groups. So some of these tactics are important when it comes to try and separate out all the emotion. So there was 3 groups, mum, dad, son 1 and son 2. And I went and saw son 1 first. And what I got them to do is to write down things that when they thought about the farm, what was really bothering them. And it was obviously around, this was all around succession and where they were, what their place was on the farm. And I got them to write down their lists on a piece of paper, but the husband and the wife, I got them to do them separately. So they weren't allowed to communicate with one another. They had to write their own thoughts. And then when they'd done that, I got the whiteboard out of the car and I asked the wife, well, in this case, I asked the wife to come and help me get the whiteboard out of the car. And that was just another strategy to try and break it down, because I'd never met these people before. So she came and helped me get the whiteboard out of the car. And this is what I call adding a little bit of theatre to the situation. I guess Jussi knows all about theatre. But so I got the whiteboard out, and then what I did is what I call laps. So I went to each person, they could give me one thing, and then I'd write that up in their words, unscrutinised. All I was doing was getting out of their heads what was in their heads. Excuse me. And so this is the early list that I got out of family one. It has been running not bad, but has slowly deteriorated. Isn't really a plan. Ideas get thrown around, but no real direction. Slowly moving goalposts. Day to day, different ideas, who gets what. Communication's difficult, talking about anything. Feels like attacking. Too many blow-ups. Little things don't get resolved. No clarity on future. Hard to make decisions. Personal-based assumptions. What does equal look like? Mixed operational messages. Now, when you read through that, some of them are quite hard to understand. Oh, what does that really mean? But when I wrote them, I just wrote down what they said. I didn't need to know what they meant. What was important was I wrote down exactly what they said. And it was important to them as opposed to important to me. And then out of that list, because I had a little bit of fluency, I tried to write a cloud with them. So I sort of did what Jussi did, where he used the website, but I was just doing this on a whiteboard and drawing this up and asking the questions as I went. So we ended up this cloud for the first family. In order to keep the family together, we must have strength and scale. In order to have strength and scale, we must farm the farm together. And in order to keep the family together, we must maintain independence, because each of the boys wanted to do their own thing. And because of that, we must not farm together. Then after that, I went and saw family number two and basically just went through the same process. And the family number two was a little bit harder. They weren't quite as clear as family number one about what they wanted. But there was a general thread there. Family number two, the boy was younger and he'd left home to go off and do other things. And then he'd come back to a farm 17 years later. And he felt like a real outcast because he hadn't been there the same amount of time as the older brother. And he had this thing about, I'm the youngest. And he was always being told what to do and none of his ideas were any good, yada, yada, yada. So he was sort of getting all this stuff off his chest. And then I did his cloud. So in order to have a successful farming family, now what his need was, he wanted respect. In order to have respect, he had a story about he wanted all-inclusive. And I never really got what that really meant, and I didn't really want to tease it out at the time, but that was what he said. In order to have a successful farming family, there must be individual focus on farming and control, because he wanted to do his thing. And because I want to do my thing, it can't be all-inclusive. So there's this general theme coming out about independence, do my own thing, but there's also this big family farm. And then I went and saw mum and dad, and in essence had the same conversation with them. And that was a very interesting thing because they actually got quite involved in the conversation. The conversation went quite deep. And they actually started challenging their own assumptions. So as Jussi said, the assumptions between these arrows here. And they really started to question their box B, protect the farm. They said, well, look, we really do want to protect the farm. But what's more important, protecting the farm or protecting the family? And it started to sound like they were starting to move from being interested in protecting the farm to start saying, hey, look, what I'm really happy about would be if our families are all still together in 5 to 10 years' time. But their cloud was, in order to have a successful succession in 5 to 10 years' time, we must protect the farm. And in order to protect the farm, what Dad was doing was taking these intervention actions. So the sons would go and do something, and Dad would come along and say, "Oh, you can't do that." And then that would set off the other side of the cloud. So in order to have a successful succession in 5 to 10 years' time, the sons are to be in partnership, but they want to farm independently. So the sons are saying, "Oh, I'm sick of Dad coming along interfering. I want to farm my own thing." So then not take intervention actions. And as Jussi said, these cross arrows. So every time Dad took an intervention action, he was violating the sons being independent farmers, because all of a sudden they were relying back on him again. And when he didn't take intervention actions, he was putting at threat protecting the farm. So he was always going on the basis that he was trying to do his best for everybody. But every time he did that, he violated the guys being able to run their farms independently. So then what I did with them is tried to combine the clouds, like the 3 UDI cloud that the ToC practitioners would be familiar with. And that was really just to get each of the clouds into one place so that everybody could see what everybody was saying. So this in effect was my report back to them. So the written report was exactly what you're seeing now. So then I did a what's next slide. The families are to confirm, yada, yada, yada. So we've got these points that we need to follow through on. And where is it now? Well, like 6 months later, we're still at the previous slide. We haven't got past that yet. And what I sense in these things is they take years to resolve. You can't just come in and wave the magic wand and it all magically happens with some sort of legal and accounting structure and it's all over. We've got to get out of the people, the emotion, and put the emotion aside and come back to some sort of structure that's going to be workable. And then what came up for me is when I was doing this and I was talking to Clark after I did this piece of work, I started realising that as practitioners, sometimes we talk too academically. So when we go to write our report, we put academic words in rather than like socialised words that people can relate to. And if we were going to use conversational language that people in the clouds would use, maybe we'd come up with this. So box A, the common goal. Hey, want to have Christmas together in 5 or 10 years' time. And in order to have that, you guys, we need to protect the farm for the future generations. And in order to protect the farm for future generations, I want to pass on the farm. But I also want to have Christmas together in 5 to 10 years' time. And I want uncontested fair distribution to the family. That's a real need of mine. And when I want uncontested distribution to the family, the only way I sense I can get that now is by not passing on the farm. In other words, I've got to sell it for market value, cash it up, and then we just distribute the cash. And then that's a 1,000 times easier than trying to deal with a block of land. And when I look at that sort of cloud, I go, oh yeah, man, that smacks you right between the eyes. And everybody can relate to that. And so what we're trying to do is protect these 3 boxes here, the A, the B, and the C, and give up on the D and the D prime and find alternatives that allow us to keep the A, the B, and the C in place. And then I started building an injection list to create that. And this is nowhere near sufficient yet. We need a way to have clearing conversations, talk about the behaviours that bother us between one another. We need to have a way of settling the scores. I think many of us have probably heard this term before, settling the scores. And this is like the 17-year gap between the 2 sons. If we don't settle that score of that 17 years and all the stories that go with it, and how one brother's older and one brother's younger and one brother's been here 17 years longer, therefore he's entitled to this, and more of that and something else. Got to get all that dealt to. And sometimes it's the really little things that upset these things. It's the really little things like you've been using diesel and that's cheaper than using petrol. And all these things have to be brought to a head. Got to use co-authorship with the family, not just go to professionals and have them work out a deal. That's never going to work. And co-authorship with these ToC tools like the cloud, getting the people to put their words in the cloud. Those UDI lists I did earlier, the undesirable effects in UDI, getting them to write down their words. This is all part of co-authorship. And the injections have to be also co-authored, not the consultant's words for the injection, but the farmer's words for the injection, the son's words for the injections. In fact, they have to build them. I think the more inputs the consultants have, the worse it gets. So the role of the consultant here is to keep the process going, keep the process on track, but let the people put the words in. And then when I was also talking to Clark after this, what we started talking about was, well, he was saying back in Ireland, like a couple of centuries ago, the farms were really big. And over time, the farms have got smaller and smaller and smaller as successions got in it. And there's been two sons, so they got half it. And then one of those sons split their half, and then their children split that half. Like it just goes on and on. And now everybody's got a little bit of nothing. And my accounting friend in Blenheim, now Blenheim in New Zealand, or Marlborough, is a well-known area for grapes, wine. And he was saying like 10, 20 years ago, the farms there went through all this difficulty of farm succession, but the thing that saved them was they could break these larger farms up into smaller economic blocks and grow grapes on them. But then the difficulty comes now that they've done that once. What about now that guy's children, and he's got 6 kids? How do you now break up that grape farm into 6 economic lots? This problem never goes away. It just manifests into a bigger and bigger problem through generations. It's like the only, if I was being facetious, what mum and dad should do is give it all to charity. That'll solve it. And so the last word here, Graham, is you might want to chip in.
There's a few things that really stand out, and I think one of the things that you've really emphasised today, Peter, is listening to what the people are saying, using their words, and not adding your own content, not going in as the expert.
Exactly. And it takes a long time to learn the art of listening. Not listening with what's in my head, listening with what the person, sorry, Graham, what was that? Listening with what they actually said and not putting your words. So quite often what you do is you hear somebody say something, you go, oh, what you mean is, and then you're paraphrasing it. No, what they mean is what they said.
Yeah.
If we want clarity on what they said, ask for clarity, but don't interpret it with your own words.
And so was it almost an advantage being a townie and not knowing much about the subject when you went in?
I think so. Yeah, because I couldn't put my words into their story. I didn't know their words.
But you knew you had a toolbox that would cope with you. And just what was the reaction of those people? I think you said they were a little bit hostile, at least one of the families when you moved in, because they thought you were coming to brainwash them.
Well, they thought I was coming to sell them Dad's story.
Okay.
And so the first son, when I was in Dad's truck, he was outside and he leaned in through Dad's window, cast his arm across to shake my hand, and just about ripped my hand out of my shoulder socket. never had my hands squeezed so hard in all my life. And I think he was just trying to tell me who was boss. Yeah.
Okay. And after you'd been through the process and given them a damn good listening to, did the mood change?
That's the bit that's the work in progress, because getting back in touch with them, what we've had is some very severe floods where a lot of these guys down in that district literally lost their land, all got washed down the river and out to sea. And then not only do we get floods, but not long before that, like a few months before that, they were in serious drought. So they've had a lot of distracting things to do. So farm succession conversations isn't on the top of their list at the moment.
Okay. It's so yes, when you're dealing with floods and droughts, then I can imagine that this gets put on the back burner.
Yeah, another 5 years.
Yeah. And 5 years of potentially getting worse and worse.
Yep, it gets worse and worse. Yeah.
I see Jussi's, when he was looking at the assumptions, one of his possible injections is renting the farm to a third party, which would allow them to keep the farm for future generations and have Christmas together.
Yeah.
So it's an example of another idea that comes out when you lay these clouds out and start challenging the assumptions.
Yeah. Many things are possible.
Yes. Okay, well, we've got a couple of minutes to go before we wrap up. If there's any questions, please pop them into the chat. If there's anyone out there, I see we've got a phone number there for you, Peter, and you've also referenced the Black Belt in Thinking. Now, that's the course that you're involved with that teaches these tools over, it was a 6-day live-in course, but I understand that's now gone online.
It's online. COVID did that to us. We couldn't run 6-day courses anymore. And it's really, it's the ToC thinking tools or thinking process tools. But what Black Belt and Thinking is all about is getting the fluency up. So the course is directed to A, learn the tool, and B, to get your fluency up.
Okay. And that's your reference earlier to doing 70 clouds in a day was all about getting your fluency up in clouds. So, yeah.
And just might actually have a wee pad here. Just hang on a sec.
Okay. Now I see there's a question in the chat. Did the participants think they made real meaningful progress towards solving the problem? So you've said it's still a work in progress.
Yeah. No, at the moment I can't answer that question.
Okay. Yeah. And this is something that's been festering away for at least, 17 years plus
20 years.
20 odd years, yeah. So even though the tools are wonderful, they're not going to fix that in over a lunchtime cup of tea, are they?
No. So when I say about 70 clouds a day, I don't know whether you can see that, but I have this thing called a cloud pad.
Yeah.
And it's all
if you stop sharing your screen, Peter.
You're starting to test me here, Graham.
Or should up the top there.
Oh, I see it. Looking on the wrong place.
Okay, so if you hold your cloud pad up now, we should be able to see that a bit better.
A cloud pad, and it's just a pad of cloud templates, and you just sit there with your pen, and anything you can start thinking of, just start scribbling on the boxes, and then tear it off, put it aside. Next one, next, and what happens is over time you start getting way more fluent in how you fill in these boxes, and follow the right process to fill in the boxes. Don't do something ad hoc. And the more fluency you get, then all of a sudden you'll get to the point where you dream clouds at night. It's like learning a foreign language. When you can dream in the foreign language, you're reasonably fluent at the foreign language. So when you can do that with clouds, I think it makes a massive difference.
Okay, right. I'll cut you off there, Peter, and we'll move move along.
Cheers.
So, if anyone, you left a phone number there. Do you want to just pop your contact details in the chat, please? And if anyone wants to find out more about the online BBIT course, or if they've got a family dispute that they want a referee for, or perhaps they're the one refereeing the dispute and they'd like someone else's input, they can give you a call.
Sure.
Right. Now let me. Right. Thank you very much, Peter, and welcome to Karl. Karl is an industrial psychologist by training. He's done quite a bit in the way of employment relations, getting in between unions and companies. And Karl's life was changed when he went on it wasn't called BBIT course, but it was a thinking course back in 2005. And he was able to realise that these tools would allow him to take a systems approach to the human being. So I will hand over to you, Karl. I'm sure they're sick of listening to me, and you can tell us a bit about how you're using the tools to change people's mindset.
Yeah, Graham, thanks very much for that. Right off the bat, I just want to pick up on that thread. I did go and do the ToC course and learnt this thinking process, and I did have an epiphany. It was 2005, and my epiphany was, if I was to look at a human being as a system of rules, policies, beliefs, and behaviours, then I should be able to apply this thinking process to myself on my own constraint. And then if I leverage that constraint, it would change my life. And that's exactly what happened. And I found a core conflict that I started to practice straight away. And it literally had a massive impact on my life. About 5 years later, after having applied the thinking processes with a number of different people, I discovered some additional content that really helped me to expand the way that I was coaching and working with people. And so what I'm going to share today is the secrets that I've discovered I've traveled through and worked as a consultant, as a coach. Now, one of the things about this process is it's highly interactive. And so what I want to do is to encourage you to use the chat. And what Graham's going to do, I mean, everybody's on mute, but what Graham's going to do is he's going to feed in that content when it's the right time, because Graham is familiar with this particular process. He's helped me before. But what are we going to do? What we're going to do today is I'm going to share. It's actually not one secret. There are multiple secrets, and they all come together. So first of all, I'm going to introduce the challenge of actually changing your mindset. I mean, have you ever tried to give up a habit? If you have ever tried to give up a habit, then you will know that changing habits is quite hard. Well, mindset is about a whole bunch of habits. So I'm going to introduce that challenge first, and then I'm going to talk about 5 different secrets. There's actually a bonus secret right at the very, very end as well. I won't get into that one in a great deal of depth, but we're going to talk about secret 1, your hidden commitments. Secondly, security doesn't equal psychological growth. That's an important one. Secret 3, mindset can actually be measured, and I'm going to show you how. 4th, the conflict cloud, and Jussi and Peter have done a fantastic job of talking about the conflict cloud and building fluency on that. And then 5 is my mindset, which is how to master your mindset, bringing all of these things together. So without further ado, the first thing I want to do is ask you in the chat, can you tell me, why would you want to change mindset? So jump in the chat. Why would you want to change mindset?
Hey, the old doesn't
Okay.
work anymore. Help me be more successful,
Right.
to get different
Yep.
results, change behaviors, become happier,
Nice.
make better
Yep.
decisions, adapt to the new world, peace of mind, align with your values.
Fantastic. Wow. Wow. So I've asked this question of my clients all the time. Why do you want to change your mindset? And those kind of things come up all the time. And what it usually boils down to is they want more satisfaction, however that looks to them. They want more satisfaction in their life. But there's another question that I ask as well, and that is, why wouldn't you change? What's the benefit of not changing? So again, jump in the chat. Tell me, what do you think the benefit of not changing is? Straight away, I can see one there. Comfort, straight away. Yes. What are some of the other benefits? Feeling secure and safe. Perfect. Security. It's easier. These are all things that people have actually shared with me when I asked this question. Makes it no effort. Yeah. Fear. Love it. Yeah. I've been doing the same thing for 20 years. Okay. So the reason, again, I've had a lot of people talk to me and say, and answer this question. And most of the time it boils down to this: security. Now, those who are proficient in conflict clouds and have been around ToC for a while, this will be starting to look a bit familiar to you, because there's satisfaction, security, change, and not change. And you can see that there's going to be a problem coming up soon. But there's another question that we want to answer, and that is, what is the commonality? If you had security and you had satisfaction, what would you have? So again, jump in the chat. If you have satisfaction and security, what do you think you'd have? A good life, says Rodney. Nice. The life I want. Freedom. Love it, Jussi. Happiness. Nice. No problems. You'd be content. Less change. More satisfaction and security equals a better life. Predictability, autonomy. Yep. And again, I've asked this question of my clients a lot. And those things, harmony. Seraphim, I love harmony. Those things come up a lot. But usually when you look at all of those things, you can boil them down to one word. And that's growth. Now, the interesting thing about growth is that this is not new. This is not new stuff, right? Because some of you will be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy. And if you look at Maslow from a psychological perspective, you can see at the bottom here, it's basic needs. Then there's psychological needs, and then there's the self-actualization. And between security and satisfaction is where Maslow sits. So Maslow talked about the need for satisfaction, the need for security and the need for satisfaction is being a part about how we evolve and develop and grow. Now that we've taken that conflict cloud and we've looked at Maslow's hierarchy, now some people will say, yeah, some people are saying, yeah, it's Ifrat's cloud. Look, it's very similar to Ifrat's cloud, but Ifrat's cloud actually focuses on the workplace. This expands outside the workplace and starts looking at individual people, because remember, it's satisfaction at work and security at work. But I'm going to pick up on that a little bit later on when we start talking about this kind of thinking and process and whether it's scalable. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs sitting right inside this conflict cloud. Now, you will all have seen this. You will know that, there is a conflict here and it's change versus not change. Now, what happens if there is change versus not change? And the interesting thing is that Robert Keegan and Lisa Lasko-Leahy, they've kind of explored this, because when it comes to growth and change in respect of growth, what they discovered was that the research shows that the single biggest cause of workplace stress is not overwork and burnout, So burnout is not about being overworked, but it's actually about going too long without experiencing your own personal development. So think about that. If you've ever felt stressed, upset, anxious, it's probably because you're not getting the growth that you actually need as a human being. So what happens when you feel pressure to change and you feel pressure not to change? So in the chat, jump in. What happens when you feel pressure to change and you feel pressure not to change? Confusion, love it, yes. What else happens? Flip-flopping, stress, paralysis, doubt. Fantastic. So if we just take a step back from that, when we feel pressure to change and we feel pressure not to change, we often resist change. And when we resist change, that's when we end up with anxiety and stress and undesirable effects and lots of dissatisfaction. And when that stuff starts to turn up, it can be really, really traumatic. But it actually gets a little bit worse than that, because when we resist change and we have these undesirable effects and we get this dissatisfaction, we actually end up stagnating. Now notice that stagnation and growth are completely opposite. But this is the reality for some people. And actually, it's the reality for most of us, just at different levels. Now, when we have stagnation and we have undesirable effects and this dissatisfaction, what actually happens is that we feel pressure to make more change. But at the same time, when we feel stagnation and undesirable effects and dissatisfaction, then we feel pressure not to change. And now we're stuck in a bind. So if you've ever wondered why it's hard to change your mindset, sit and ponder on this for a minute. I'm just going to let you sit there and just take that in. So this is the challenge of changing mindset. Now, fortunately, there have been a number of people who have helped and explored these very, very things. And one of them I've already talked about. So Robert Keegan and Lisa Lasko-Leahy, they've written multiple books, but two are really important. One is How the Way We Talk Can Change the Way We Work. Now, this book had a real impact on me because around 2009, 2010, I read this book and I went, oh, that's a conflict cloud inside that. The process that they were using looks like a conflict cloud, just in a table form. But then they wrote another book called Immunity to Change. And I went, well, there's an alignment here. Now we've got this table, this looks like a conflict cloud and immunity to change. And there is this thing called resistance to change within the ToC world. I wonder how those two things sit together. And so what happened is that I realized that actually Robert Keegan and Lisa Lasko-Leahy were actually talking about the connection between security and not changing. And they came up with the solution and they said, behind not changing, there is a hidden commitment. Now, if you think about this, security is usually in a biological sense attached to the amygdala, and the amygdala, the body, is all about protecting itself and keeping itself safe and secure. So, we do need or feel a need to have security, especially when it comes to our basic needs. And so to meet our basic needs, we don't want to change, and the commitment that sits behind it is one of the challenges we have to overcome. So they said, if you can find the hidden commitment, if you can find the commitments to your security and then find a different way to satisfy that security and that commitment, then you will be able to change. And so that's what they did. They said, find an alternative way to satisfy the hidden commitment. Now, straight away, you can see that that's taken away some of that resistance to change. It'll take away some of the undesirable effects. It'll take away some of the stagnation. But it's not enough.
Now, Karl, I'm just going to butt in here because I think this hidden commitment thing is one of the real keys to your talk, and I just want to make sure that everyone understands it. And I think the best way is, and I think it's Robert Keegan's story about an investigation they did, and a whole load of heart patients who weren't taking their heart pills.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, the logical thing is, if you're a heart patient and you're going to die if you take these pills, why wouldn't you take them? And yet an extraordinary percentage of people weren't taking their heart pills.
Yeah.
And the hidden commitment behind that is these people subconsciously associated taking pills with getting old.
That's
and
right.
So they didn't want to feel they were becoming old, so they wouldn't take their pills.
That's exactly right. And that need is a security-based need, that I don't want to feel old, so I'm not going to take my pills. And the funny thing is, though, you can ask people, so why is it important? Why do you not take your pills? And they usually completely ignore it and answer a different question. They say, well, because if I don't take my pills, I'll die. So it's that unconscious, it's that hidden, and it sits in the back of our unconscious. And unless we can discover it, and the wonderful thing is the conflict cloud helps us to discover our hidden commitments, our hidden assumptions, the unconscious ones that we've actually developed over many, many years through our lives. So that's the first secret. And that is, there is a hidden commitment. And if you find it, then you can have a breakthrough, because you can then replace how you satisfy that hidden commitment with a different solution. But it's not enough.
This is also why it's so hard to break habits and change the way you do things, because there's a hidden commitment in there that's stopping you. And you found that by using a cloud, you can have an almost instant impact on that.
Absolutely. I mean, another way of describing a hidden commitment is a belief. Now, one way of thinking about a belief is just an assumption that's inside our minds. So what we're actually doing is saying, find the assumption, test the assumption, satisfy the assumption in a different way. And that's how we can get that experience. But that's level one. Let's have a look at level two, because it's not enough. And fortunately, there is some great research by a wonderful lady called Brené Brown. And Brené Brown tested another assumption. She tested this one here. The assumption is, in order to have growth, we need security and safety. And you know what? That is actually true if it's about basic needs, but it's not true if it's about psychological growth. And that's an important distinction. So Brené Brown challenges it and says, actually, for psychological growth, we don't want security, because security shows up as armor. Now, I know that this slide's a little bit difficult to read, but there's a whole list of undesirable effects, basically, in terms of armored leadership. And she says, actually, there's a whole bunch of things that we can do that as daring leadership that will actually improve our situation. Now, and that's what we want to do, is move from armor to daring leadership. And she identifies two different types when we look at that list. One is the swords and the other is shields. And I'll get into that in a little bit more depth in a minute. But Brené Brown says vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. And vulnerability is not weakness. It's our greatest measure of courage. And here's the really, really important bit. When you shut down vulnerability, you shut down opportunity. Now, what that really means is that if you want more opportunity, you have to be vulnerable, you have to get away from that security. Now, that's important when you start thinking about innovation inside companies. So now we know secret 2, security does not equal growth. Vulnerability equals growth. So now we've got vulnerability and find an alternative way to satisfy the hidden commitment. Now, question is, how do we measure it? And measuring it is a really, really interesting exercise. This is what I found in 2010. These guys, Rob Cook and Dr. Clayton Lafferty. Now, they do specialize in the area of psychology, industrial relations, culture, team performance in terms of thinking and behavior. And what's really important about their work, though, is that they've created a measure, and this measure allows us to see 2 things. First of all, satisfaction, it's up here, and security down here at the bottom. Now, this really resonated with me because if you read chapter 38 of It's Not Luck, Goldratt said there were 3 necessary conditions if you want prosperity in an organization. And I'm riffing on this a little bit, but the first is obviously commercial responsibility. You've got to make money. The second is we need to continually satisfy and improve customer satisfaction. And the last one is secure and satisfied people. So this gives us a way of seeing whether or not we're hitting that 3rd necessary condition. So again, measuring armor. Measuring armor. Oh, thanks, Vicky. So she's just saying Ifrat, not Ali. Absolutely. Ifrat was the person who developed the Ifrat's cloud, which this is very, very similar to it. Now, when it comes to security and satisfaction, we have a picture here of the armor, and what we can see is oppositional, power, competitive, and perfectionistic. They are like task-orientated, security-based behaviors. But equally, there are shields where we try and protect ourselves, and those are people-orientated, security-based behaviors. And so now, with this picture, too far, I'll go back one. If you are heavily security-based and resisting change, we can actually see this in your thinking and behavior. And this is a person where you can actually see if this is a true set of results. Now, and it's also burnout territory. Now, if we want to put the armor down and we use vulnerability and we find alternative ways to satisfy the hidden commitment, then we end up increasing our satisfaction. And so we move from security to satisfaction, and we can dissolve this conflict. So, secret number 3, mindset can be measured, and the space between security and satisfaction can be measured. And if you can measure it, you can take action on it, and that's really important. So, secret number 4, it's not really a secret because Goldratt and his conflict cloud, and as Vicky pointed out, Ifrat, but in terms of bringing it to psychology, we can use the conflict cloud to actually help people find hidden commitments and find ways to improve or increase their growth by finding ways to be vulnerable at the same time. And so secret number 4 is the conflict cloud itself applied to the human system. Now, finally, if we bring all of these together, we've got Robert Keegan and Lisa Lasko-Leahy, we've got Brené Brown, and we've got Rob Cook and Clayton Lafferty. If we bring all of these together and in a synergistic way, then what we can do is create a process, and it's a unique synthesis, and this is exactly what I've been doing, taking the synthesis of systems thinking through ToC, immunity to change, daring leadership, and a world-class psychological assessment. And what it creates is a really fast, safe, and measurable way to change for good. And I would argue that actually most of the clients that I have who experience it, they call it a breakthrough. No, that makes sense, right? Because ToC does create breakthrough solutions. There's no reason why it can't create breakthrough solutions in our own mindsets. But one more, because this is the bonus secret. It's scalable. This model of measurement, measuring human thinking and behavior, we can measure individual performance. We can measure how teams behave with each other. Interesting note about how people, in terms of team performance and how people behave with each other, there are two things that you need to help a team perform. One of them has some ground rules around how we behave, and two is use a really rational problem-solving process. So ToC is really good for that too. And you can measure at an organizational level. And the question that we use at an organizational level is, how do you think you're expected to behave around here? It's literally culture. How do you think you're expected to behave around here? If it's highly security orientated, then you're probably going to struggle as an organization. But if it's really highly satisfaction orientated and you don't resist change, then you're more likely to innovate and make more progress. So we can look at it at an individual, at a team, and an organizational level. So, change. Most people put their hands up. Who wants change? Most people put their hands up. Who wants to change? Well, most people do, but there is a hidden commitment. There is something behind us that actually stops it, and that's at an individual, team, and organizational level. So my name's Karl Perry. I'm the mindset coach, and I use ToC to help people have breakthrough solutions, individual, team, and organizational performance. And there's my LinkedIn profile. Please come and connect with me, and I'm happy to share my work with all of you. And so that's it. I think I've managed to get that in 30 minutes.
Yeah, well done, Karl. And I know Karl's been under a little bit of stress because of all days, today the local power company told him they were shutting down so they could do some extra work. So he's running on battery, and
I am. Yep. And to make matters worse, literally 3 minutes before turning up at this presentation, I couldn't get the blooming personal hotspot to work. And I was thinking, oh my God, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it. But I'm here. I got it. I made it. So if it felt a little bit rushed, it probably was. But I hope you got some insights from it. And happy to jump into any questions. And I know that we've got a bit of a Q&A with Jussi and Peter as well, coming up real soon. Graham, is that how we're going to roll?
Yes. I'm just wondering, before we move to that, I would just like to sell Karl a bit. I've been through his personal coaching course, and breakthrough is a really good word for it. The thing about the hidden commitments is they're hidden. You won't find them yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you find that you're a people pleaser, or that you're always being the devil's advocate or something like that, there is a reason deep buried in there somewhere for you to do that. And if you haven't found it by now, stop mucking around and get a professional to dig around in your head and help you find it, would be my advice.
Yep, absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
Track them down. It really worthwhile. Okay, we're going to have a Q&A. For those of you who've been sitting down for an hour and a half, let's have a quick 2-minute break while I sort out getting Peter and Jussi back on. And if you want to start firing some questions through, then we'll continue in a couple of minutes. Thank you, Karl.
You're welcome.
Right. I'll just... Oh. No. Right, let me... Participants. Oh, no. Unmute. And... Spotlight and add spotlight and Karl. And what have I done here? No. Karl, why can't I spotlight you? Is there a limit to how many people I can spotlight? No. Not sure. Right, so I'm not sure if that's our couple of minutes. Perhaps
Karl's turned off his video, that's why you can't spotlight him.
Oh, okay. Right.
He might be pedaling furiously, trying to charge his batteries.
Right, yeah. So he's trying to preserve battery. So, okay, well, there might be a few people who've left to go and have a comfort stop, but let's make a start. Perhaps just throw open to the panel. What did you learn from today's sessions? Jussi, I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah, I learned a lot. I took notes. And there was some chats, in the chat window, also private chats. One thing that I learned and actually came more clear to me than ever actually is that how important is now in post-COVID reality to use these tools as through the lens of empathy and compassion. And these thinking processes, the thinking is too thin term to describe them. It is more about experience processes or processes, holistic processes, where we need to take into consideration the whole human being, not just thinking, but our heart and gut and everything that comes. And I was fascinated to hear those two presentations after me, because they kind of convinced me that there are way more deeper things you can do with these tools. Business is one area, but life in general is good playground for this. And like I always say, life is bigger than your intellect. You need to use these tools in an intuitive way through empathy and compassion, and then you make those breakthroughs. So that was kind of my takeaway from those two presentations I was watching.
So, and that, I think, what Peter was saying about that empathetic listening, using their words and making these people feel listened to.
Absolutely.
And given that I come out of the realm of accountants, being one of myself, and having often talked to lawyers, I do find a lot of the time they're always talking at you.
Yeah.
And it's been a real thing of mine, particularly in the last 10 years, to not do that to our customers, and actually do what Graham was saying, to listen and use their words.
And I think there's, when you're a consultant, you're often wearing different hats. I think there are times when you are the expert. You do have to solve problems, put your head above the trenches and make a decision. There are times perhaps when you're a mentor and you can tell people what you've done in case it's of any use to them. But when you're a coach, it's about helping them discover it for themselves. And you do that with this empathetic listening. That must be a big challenge for you, Karl, when you're helping people change.
Yeah, and I just want to pick up on a couple of highlights. When Jussi was talking about helping his client, what he was helping them to do was to actually discover the hidden commitment. And if you look at Jussi's cloud, and it's actually the same with Peter's cloud as well, One of them will be satisfaction based and the other will be about protecting themselves and be security based. And even your core conflict, when I looked at yours, Peter, I could see once again there was some security stuff in there. And so finding ways for that family to find alternative ways to keep their security was really important. And so I can absolutely see why you would be making a massive difference to their lives, and not just their financials or their manufacturing. It's actually changing people's lives. And, you know, it was great. Just the very fact that this conference exists, it's great to discover another coach, Jussi, actually using the conflict clouds, because I've been doing it since 2005, and I cannot believe how powerful it has been for people to get their minds right. Because if you can get their mind right, you can literally change everything about your life. If you can find out, and this is one of the great things about the ToC thinking processes, it's not about adding stuff, it's about taking stuff away that stops you getting the goal. It's about removing the obstacles. And there is no bigger obstacle than what is in the back of our minds that we can't see. If you can take away the obstacles in the back of your head that you don't know are there, you will literally break through. And that's why people have aha moments when they use conflict clouds. Oh my God, I've never seen that before.
Karl, it's a bit like saying to somebody, look, I don't want you to do anything new. I just want you to stop doing that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. And what happens when you stop doing a whole lot of stuff that you shouldn't be doing?
Exactly. I will just start a new job. No, I stop doing that.
That's exactly right. Well, so whether it's a business system or a farming system or a team system or an individual system, it's the same. And if you can discover the hidden assumptions, and one of the great things that Graham did when he really helped me connect, a belief is just an assumption. It's an assumption about how the world is. Yeah. And so if you can use a thinking process to discover the assumption and dissolve the assumption and find a different one, you can find a new belief. And if you find a new belief, you will free yourself from your current constraints. So, I mean, just great to be working with you guys and watching Peter, you using it in that farming community in New Zealand with those cow cockies and those sheep cockies. Yeah. And Jussi, awesome. I mean, the highlight's been actually standing next to you guys and seeing this stuff in real life working for people.
Yes, yesterday I had our tax, or Viago's tax man here, not the Inland Revenue, but from PwC.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about quite a lot of stuff. And he had a conflict. And right. So we were talking it through, and his conflict was he's got 3 children, a 13-year-old and 2 that are younger than that, I think. And he said, well, you know, you want to do the most you can for your kids. I said, Michael, you're a bloody rich dude out of PwC. You've got plenty of money. It doesn't really matter what you do and you don't do. Why do you feel the need you got to do the best for your kids? What does that look like? Well, I'd like to help them into their first car, and I'd like to send them to private school, and I'd like them to do this and do that. I said, oh, yes. And what about if you don't do that? Oh, well, if I don't do that, I don't feel like I'm being the good dad and yada, yada. So we're talking this conflict through. And I said, Michael, you haven't thought about it deep enough yet. You've just got this thing going on in your head.
Yeah.
You need to start thinking about it. Because I said, for me, I wanted my children to buy their first car. And he goes, why? Because I want them to have a claim on pride that in 20 years' time, when they talk to their children, they say, I bought my own first car with my own money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you know, and he went away and he was quite, you know,
Yeah.
quite tall.
So that's actually a great example. His hidden commitment that he probably doesn't realise is always wanting to be seen as the good dad. And I just see we've had a couple of people asking for a little bit more detail. How do you find the hidden assumption? How do you find the hidden commitment? How do you challenge assumptions?
So that's the beauty of the conflict cloud. I wasn't sure if you were asking me that or somebody else. Sorry, I jumped in.
It's a general question. Way you go, Karl. We'll rein you in if we need to.
Well, Peter actually hit on it. There are two questions. And the first is, why do you want to change? Why do you want this thing that you say you want? Because that'll help you find the need, the assumption, the satisfaction. But the other question, and it's the one that Peter did connect with, and that is, why do you want to stay the same? What is the benefit of staying the same? What is the benefit of not changing? That is the question that will help you to find the hidden commitment. And it usually takes a little while. So what I find with my clients is that they do have to think quite hard. Well, of course they have to think quite hard, because you're actually asking them to discover what is the assumption that holds them in security.
So when you're saying, I don't want to eat junk food, I want to give up smoking, I want to get fit, it's easy to see the need behind that. So what's the need to keep smoking, to keep eating badly, to lie on the couch and watch Netflix all night?
Yeah. And my favorite is, what's the need to drink wine on a Friday, and why do I keep finding myself drinking more of it than I should? And the ironic thing is, the benefit for me of drinking wine is to slow my thinking down. Because I don't want to think.
Yeah.
Imagine what happens.
Too scary.
Too
scary.
It's fearful. The fear shows up.
I just flicked a comment in the chat, zombie game.
Yeah.
Our crew built a game called, they call it the zombie game. Zombies are coming to get you. And it's a game that's been designed to get people to get fluent in thinking of assumptions.
Nice.
Because what happens is, when people think in assumptions, they go, they can't get one out of their head.
Yeah.
And this was a major obstacle for, like resolving clouds.
Yeah.
And what we know is, they get the first 10 assumptions out of their head, and the real gems are beyond that. They're assumption number 15 and 17.
Yeah.
And so we built the zombie game to, the zombies are coming to get you because. And you have to write down as many becauses, and there's a time limit on it. And I mean, I hate the game, but
is that because it tests your assumptions, Peter? Every time
I don't know what it is. I just hate it. But
makes you think.
Yeah,
that'll be your security showing up. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, that's exactly. But it's got people to, because what happens to people is, when they think of this stuff, their brain filters all the good ones out before they actually write it down. So the brain's doing this filtering process.
Nice.
And the idea of the zombie game was to get people to stop their brain from filtering stuff and just start writing stuff down.
Yeah.
And we found that a massive help for getting people over this thing about trying to get assumptions down.
There's another one.
Once again, I was just going to say, that's another example of having a structure to get creativity.
Yeah, and also one thing is to use simple questions to start people, help people to start surfacing assumptions. But I have found often useful, I just ask, is it always so? So to think those assumptions as kind of like I put in my slides, fingerprints. They are fingerprints that the person or the life has left there, and some of those fingerprints belong to the really dangerous criminals, which are those old assumptions, false assumptions that don't hold any more water. And then if you ask, is it always so? And then you start to, if that thing happens, then you start to break it down. And like in my example, this designer lady, she hates sales. And when I ask, do you always hate sales? And then, yeah, I have had these things when I didn't hate sales. And you break it down, you help people by asking those basic questions. Is it always so? Is this a fact, or is this an opinion? Is this an emotion, or is this a kind of something that comes from external, like your family setting or whatever? Then you start, like I think, Peter, in your case, you started to hear more and more and more from those people. You don't need to understand their world so much, but you just help them to understand themselves. And surfacing assumptions, like Vicky put in the chat, highlighting that the website that I was using, it has really good and concise way of surfacing those assumptions and start the game. And then you can, like Karl, you have shown how deep you can then go. So start with the basics, and like Peter said, fluency comes then little by little, and suddenly there's this whole ocean. But start with the first bubble on the surface.
Jussi, I thought it was really cool. You talked about the simple questions. And if you think about how a cloud is constructed, they are actually fantastic, precise coaching questions, because it simply goes like this. What do you want? Oh, you want that. What benefit would it bring you? Oh, that benefit. Great. What are you complaining about? Oh, you don't have what you want. Okay. What's the benefit of not having what you want? What do you mean? What's the benefit of not having what you want? Well, there must be a benefit for not having what you want, because otherwise you would have it. And then what if you have those two needs, what would that be like? And they go, that would be awesome. And then when you've got that, they can see the problem. And from a coaching perspective, ownership of the problem is gold. As soon as you try and bring your own content to a conflict cloud, you will destroy their conflict cloud and you will bring in new assumptions. So it's very Socratic. It's very, it's actually how science and education is founded. And in fact, if you go back far enough with conflict clouds and you start looking at Plato and Socrates and Hegel and paradox, you'll discover all of that stuff in there. It's really, really interesting. Because even back in those days, they were still asking the same question. How do I improve my life?
Which brings to my mind my old favorite from late 70s. I go back all the time to one book, which is Chinese book of changes called I Ching, with Carl Gustav Jung's foreword and Richard Wilhelm's translation. It's brilliant because it's all about change. It's all about understanding those undercurrents that otherwise would be undercurrents. But when we use these tools, we surface them and then we can deal with them.
I want to pick up, there's something else you said, Jussi, and that was about there are different levels. And I noticed that Vicky in the chat was using the annotations A, B, C, D, and D prime. And you can, one of the ways of solving a conflict cloud is to look at C and D prime, and you can say, how can I have C and D and it has something to do with B, and that's how you can dissolve D prime. Now that's a first level, because that's basically saying I can get my security. But if you want a deeper, much, much deeper psychological breakthrough, you have to dissolve A and C. Just like Brené Brown did. Growth is not about security. Growth is about vulnerability. That's a game changer. If you dissolve the assumption between AC, you will have a significant shift in your life in terms of your psychological growth. So actually, dissolving it at B and D prime, that will help you maintain your security and get some change. But dissolving it at A and C, that will give you vulnerability. And when you act on that, it will change your mindset.
Okay. Right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear from three people who are taking these tools and using them actively in their everyday life, and also outside of the traditional sort of in a business, in a manufacturing type environment. So thank you very much for your time. Just want to pick up on one thing and use one of Karl's analogies. When you're in that change, no change situation, it's like sitting in your car with one foot on the brake and one foot on the accelerator. At best, you're bunny hopping along. If you can find that hidden commitment, it's like releasing the brake and you will fly. And the whole idea of taking 30 days to change a habit, something like that, it doesn't have to be like that. So I hope everyone's enjoyed the session. There's the link, I think, was in the chat a while ago for the next session. That will be starting in 5 or 6 minutes. And we will be hearing from Clark Kaching, who will be telling us why cash cows make the best burgers. So hopefully we'll see you all again in 5 or 6 minutes. Thank you very much, everyone.
Guys.
Awesome.
Thanks,
guys.
Nice
Great to work with you guys.
Bye.
Remember 70 a day.
Cigarettes.
No, not cigarettes.
No. Hey, lovely job, guys. That was really cool. Thank you.
Okay, right. I'll end it now.